Hello there, little masters, and welcome to another weekly episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where tonight, the good stuff is going to hit you like a quart of mead and make you blow smoke rings.
West to how, my friends. I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, the Aragorn to my AMR, Alan Sisto.
Thank you, Sean. You know, I was afraid I was going to be the walking dog to your black ram or something like that after last episode.
Oh, man, missed opportunity.
Hi, my name is Rover, and I'll be your waiter tonight.
With no opposable thumbs.
With no opposable thumbs, how I'm going to carry those plates. Folks, tonight we pick up the story in Beorn's Hall, where our heroes get some much-needed rest, nourishment, and a little bit of wisdom before resuming their quest in the second half of Chapter 7 of The Hobbit, Queer Lodgings.
Now, we promise we will get to know Beorn still a little bit better in this episode, but we will try not to go as long as we did last time. That one, we went a bit longer than we expected to, and we really are going to try to do a little more bare bones podcast this time.
Oh, well, yeah, we'll be focusing on the bare necessities. But first...
On that note...
Oh, that's just awful. It is time for another Tolkien Fun Fact.
Well, thank you, Alan, and we're not done with bears just yet.
No,
Tonight's
we're not.
Tolkien Fun Fact is a timely one, though it is a little less focused on the professor himself and more on his family. You see, J.R.R. Tolkien's children, John, Michael, Christopher, and Priscilla, when they were growing up, they loved bears. They had lots of teddy bears, apparently. Priscilla, who's the youngest and only girl, had a collection that reached at least 60 teddy bears at one point.
Oh, my goodness.
And most of the stories that Tolkien wrote specifically for his children do feature bears in prominent roles. Mm-hmm. Now, if you've been listening to us for long enough, I'm sure you can't forget the elaborate stories from the North Pole that Tolkien wrote to his children in the Letters from Father Christmas. Remember, we had everybody's favorite ursine, the North Polar bear in that one. His cousins Paksu and Valkatuka.
I'm everyone's favorite ursine. What's an ursine?
What's an ursine? Ooh, silly little errand boy. His cousins Paksu and Valkatuka, the Finnish-named bears, and the cave cubs.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, North Polar Bear, or NPB as we grew to know and love him, was at least as mighty a goblin slayer as Beorn himself.
Oh, yeah.
Remember some of those pictures of him just
Flinging
throttling goblins and kicking them around.
Yeah.
But he was also a kind and gentle creature. Remember, he would always send love and greetings to the Tolkien kids' teddy bears.
If not letters. A poor speller, but yeah.
Very poor speller. But such a cool runic handwriting.
Loved him.
Fantastic stuff. If you are not familiar with Tolkien's Father Christmas letters, you should absolutely check out our episode 28, which we released for, Christmas 2016? And then we re-released it a few weeks ago for Christmas 2017.
Yeah, and I suspect it'll probably be a Christmas re-release every year we're doing the show.
Yeah, why not? It'll be our own little Charlie Brown Christmas special. Our
minus the cool jazz
Rudolph.
Music. Oh, yeah. Rankin and Bass Rudolph. There you go.
We
are the island of misfit toys.
We certainly are.
We really are. Just so you know.
Yeah, and my mother still wishes I had been a dentist. But even more obscure than the Father Christmas letters, there's a book Tolkien wrote and illustrated called Mr. Bliss, which features 3 bears named Archie, Teddy, and Bruno, who were apparently based on teddy bears that were actually owned by the 3 Tolkien boys at that time.
Oh, wow. I like those names. Archie, Teddy, and Bruno.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like a gang.
It does.
Sounds
good
like
bear
something
names.
that maybe I might hear in West Side Story or something like that.
The bears.
They're the Jets.
It's not the Sharks and the Jets, it's the bears.
They're part of the Jets, yeah. Well, it seems that The Hobbit, of course, was no exception to this bear thing. Tolkien wrote it for his kids, as we know, and he included the character of Beorn in it, presumably to cater to his children's appreciation for really big, nasty, evil bears. No, just bears. But that is right. John
big,
Rateliff,
friendly, happy bears who
happy
are...
bears. Big, happy bears
not
who
very
maul...
nice to goblins.
Who maul wargs and behead goblins. Rateliff says in an essay relating to this chapter, Tolkien himself said, an author writes primarily to please himself and uses his own interests as a guide. Yet a writer is also naturally inclined to include things that he knows from first-hand experience will interest his audience, just as he may be tempted to exclude or downplay themes he knows will bore them.
Yeah, I think a good example of that, not just the bears themselves, but Rateliff also points out that Tolkien's children were fans of the Dr. Dolittle books.
That's true.
We talked a little bit about the talking animals last time. Not sure how they would have felt about the movie with Rex Harrison. But,
not sure, but I have some ideas.
Yeah, I can probably guess. In keeping with that quote from Rateliff, it's worth noting that even though he was writing to please his kids, Tolkien also found a nice philological puzzle to satisfy his own interests by playing on the various meanings of the Old English word Beorn, which we discussed in our last episode. I think it's really cool the way he was able to do that to satisfy his own interests and those of his kids.
Yeah.
Also fascinating when I stopped to think about the fact that only a few years before Tolkien wrote The Hobbit, another Englishman, who was a former signals officer in the Great War, had written a storybook in which he turned his child's teddy bear into a honey-addicted hero.
Of course.
That author, of course, was A.A. Milne, and the bear was Winnie the Pooh.
Yes,
but,
it was.
I'm sure the similarity ends there, kind of like what Tolkien said about his ring and Wagner's ring.
Yeah, that is about the end of the similarity.
Both were bears, and there the similarity ends.
Well, except I'm just trying to picture Beorn, instead of wearing the brown tunic, wearing just a red shirt.
Yeah.
And nothing else. No pants, which is still weird. Still weird to me.
Oh, bother. So, now that we've gotten through the Tolkien Fun Fact, I have to ask, Alan, so if you were to write a story for your kids, what would they demand you include in it? Would it be bears?
My goodness. Well, my daughter would insist on Anna and Elsa, along with Rapunzel at the very least. Those three princesses are, royalty. Must be present.
Of course.
My son, it just depends on what week you ask him. What movie is he want to watch 6 times this week, as opposed to the movie that's going to be different next week. Right now, it would be Legos and Hot Wheels and Baymax.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He would probably. Ba-la-la-la-la-la. Ba-la-la-la-la-la.
Hello.
Are you satisfied with your service? But ask me in a week and it'll be a different answer.
Sure.
How about you?
Well, I have to say our kids would probably get along pretty well.
Oh, yeah. I have a feeling too well.
But no, honestly, it does change periodically, month to month at least. And I think right now I'd probably have to find a way to work in a pony.
Oh, no.
And maybe a haunted house.
Oh,
with a Pac-Man machine in it.
Oh, goodness. Okay, that's cool. Well, I'm picturing a pony playing Pac-Man in a haunted house, and that is an image I won't forget anytime soon. But on that note, we should probably go ahead and get on with the discussion.
I don't think our listeners are going to bear much more of this.
Oh, that's bad stuff. We last left our heroes. I love doing that line, by the way. I know I do that far too often.
When we last left our heroes.
Yeah, Beorn had just disappeared. Bilbo had kind of woken up from his little snooze as the dwarves were telling their stories. And I'm going to go ahead and pick up exactly where we were. Now, I'm not going to read all the stanzas. Again, we try not to violate IP whenever possible. So I'm going to read the first one and then the last 2, along with a little bit of the passage after that. The dwarves were sitting cross-legged on the floor round the fire, and presently they began to sing. Some of the verses were like this, but there were many more, and their singing went on for a long while. The wind was on the withered heath, but in the forest stirred no leaf. There shadows lay by night and day, and dark things silent crept beneath. And now moving to the last 2, talking about the same wind. It passed the lonely mountain bare, and swept above the dragon's lair. There black and dark lay boulders stark, and flying smoke was in the air. It left the world, and took its flight over the wide seas of the night. The moon set sail upon the gale, and stars were fanned to leaping light. Bilbo began to nod again, and suddenly up stood Gandalf. "It is time for us to sleep," he said. "For us, but not, I think, for Beorn. In this hall we can rest sound and safe, but I warn you all not to forget what Beorn said before he left us. You must not stray outside until the sun is up, on your peril." Bilbo found that beds had already been laid at the side of the hall, on a sort of raised platform between the pillars and the outer wall. For him there was a little mattress of straw and woolen blankets. He snuggled into them very gladly, summertime though it was. The fire burned low, and he fell asleep. Yet in the night he woke. The fire had now sunk to a few embers. The dwarves and Gandalf were all asleep, to judge by their breathing. A splash of white on the floor came from the high moon, which was peering down through the smoke hole in the roof. There was a growling sound outside, and a noise as of some great animal scuffling at the door. Bilbo wondered what it was, and whether it could be Beorn in enchanted shape, and if he would come in as a bear and kill them. He dived under the blankets and hid his head, and fell asleep again at last, in spite of his fears. Ah.
Boy, that's going to be a restless night.
Yeah, that is. You know, when you're a kid and you think that there's a monster under the bed, and you're trying not to go back to sleep, and then eventually you fall back asleep and say, what do I do asleep? There's a monster in there.
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be a rough night.
Except he actually knows there's a monster outside the door.
And it's a bear. But luckily for him, the bear probably can't use the key to get back in.
No.
Lots to unpack here, but I want to start with the song itself.
Yeah.
I want to compare this to the Far Over the Misty Mountains Cold poem because they have the exact same meter and rhyme.
They do.
They're 4-line stanzas with that AABA, right? So going back to that first stanza, heath, leaf, and beneath.
And then day,
but then in that third line, you get lay by night and day. So there's that internal rhyme. That's exactly the same pattern as we see in the Far Over the Misty Mountains Cold. And they could be sung to the exact same tune. In fact, they probably were. But
they probably would have been.
I will save your ears and not sing this. But if you take even the tune that it wasn't Howard Shore, but I can't remember the name of the group that came up with the tune for that song.
Oh, from Jackson's trilogy?
From Jackson's film.
Yeah, that was a cool tune, too.
They're the same ones who came up with the party tune in Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit party tune at Bilbo's party. But I can't remember their name. That tune, if you take that tune and sing these verses, it works. And it's pretty cool. So
that's cool.
Really just a neat poem. And I think we spent some time on this during our Tolkien Reading Day episode, but I want to spend some more time on that for folks who didn't listen to that episode. And of course, we can spend a little more time in it here in terms of context, talking about the subject matter itself. Looking at this wind.
This wind that sort of features prominently in the poem.
It really is pretty cool stuff.
It is. It's an interesting. There's just a clear. I don't even know how to describe it. It's a sense of purpose. I mean, the wind is really describing the dwarves themselves, isn't it?
It is.
And their quest.
And the wind, unlike the wind that we kind of think of when we think of the wind, this is like a very specific wind that starts in a place and moves to another and moves to another and moves to another. So it's a very identifiable wind, if you will.
Yeah. And there's a lot of imagery here that I think is really potent.
Oh, a ton.
And especially in reference to the dwarves. You talk about place to place and you see how the wind moves from west to east.
Yes.
Not only is that the direction of the dwarves' journey in a literal sense, but west is always the direction of good and light in Middle-earth, and east is always the direction of evil and darkness. And so what you have here is a description of how the dwarves are going to return to a symbolic description of how the dwarves are going to return to their home and challenge the evil that's living there.
And yet then you get the last stanza, which kind of takes it beyond the representation of the dwarves and puts it back into, this greater scheme of things, right? We've talked before about how this is all part of a plan and how this fits into the scheme that Iluvatar might have for the end as the Third Age comes to an end. That it goes from representing the dwarves as they go, to the Lonely Mountain, and then ends up taking this almost theological concept in the final stanza. And Olson has another great quote. I know we shared a quote from him last time. I try not to quote him every single episode, but this was another really good one. He says that it is an interesting fact that the first draft of the Dwarves' Wind Song, though almost identical to the final version in other respects, does not contain the last stanza at all. Tolkien added that later when he revised the text. And this suggests two things: that the last stanza does indeed add a new dimension to the song that it didn't have before, and that this new dimension is something Tolkien was thinking about more in the latter stages of writing the book than he was at the beginning. It does seem that the references to luck and the implications that some destiny is taking a hand in the events of the story increase as the story goes along.
Wow.
So,
And this is
Really
sort
good
of a
stuff.
microcosm of that, seeing how
It is,
how luck,
yeah.
the sense of purpose really comes in at the end. There's truly this idea that destiny and luck are making this a reality. And one of the words, there's so many little words that I think we could spend time on here, but one of my favorites in this poem is like a tide it roared and rolled. This use of the
I
word
love that
tide.
line. I know we didn't get to read that stanza, but I love that.
I know, it's a great one. And I'm reminded that the word tide doesn't just mean, the surging of the ocean, the way the moon, affects
right.
the tides. But it also means a powerful surge of feeling or a trend in events. And the etymology of the word, actually, it comes from an Old English word that means a time or a period or an era. And I think that's what's happening here. Is I think
Time and tide.
Yeah,
Time
exactly.
And tide, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think this wind represents a new era that's coming. I think that's what that's about.
That's really cool insight. I hadn't even thought about that. But that, another good one. I thought I heard you typing something. Were you looking up the name of the group that had...
I was trying to. I haven't found it yet, though.
Okay, well, we'll try to, we'll put that in our show notes, or maybe we'll address that. That's a perfect thing to address in our postscript, so we'll do that then.
Or somebody can Google it and
well,
find
yeah,
it
somebody
for us,
might.
but
I'm sure somebody will.
couldn't find it.
But they won't hear about it until after we've recorded the postscript, so...
That's true.
Just if you want to know, sign up for our Patreon group there. You also mentioned, I think you were talking to me off air about the tassels of the grass. The grasses hiss their tassels. Ben is another line that you really
Thank you. Yeah,
stood out.
I forgot about that one because since we didn't kind of move past that one, but since you didn't read it, it didn't come to my mind. But the tassels. The word tassel actually is only mentioned 3 times in the book. And it's once here, and the other 2 are actually in reference to the silver tassel on Thorin's hood.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And I remembered the first one was the tassel on the hood in the
and
first
then the
chapter.
last is towards the end. His tassel is mentioned again. He is the only dwarf who has a tassel on his hood, and so I can't help seeing the tassel as a symbol of his kingship. And so the reference to the tassels of the grass, I don't know. I feel like there's just
there's something there,
nod towards Thorin's kingship there.
I like that. Boy, that's a subtle thing. Yeah.
And
Wouldn't be
I don't
surprised.
know what to make about it. It could be a case of looking too hard because it is the tassels of the grass.
Right.
It's not like the wind itself has tassels, but I don't know. I can't think that that's an accident. I'm sure that has to be intentional because it's not a word that appears much in this book.
No, it's not. Well, and I'm not even sure of its origins.
I don't know.
If it's the kind of word, how he uses silver but not argent except for that one time, that kind of thing, where he doesn't use a word because it doesn't come from the same origin that he would.
Right.
But in this case, and you know what it's a Middle English source.
It's a Middle English word for a fastener.
But it's from an old French word.
Oh yeah.
But it's from an old French, so that's not a surprise that he wouldn't use that word very often. So. Anyway,
very interesting.
I thought it was interesting that this song and the Misty Mountain song were both sung under very similar circumstances in a comfortable domestic setting right before setting out on a dangerous journey.
That's true.
In this case, a slightly more dangerous journey than the first half, but, they don't necessarily know that. But here they are. It's the night before they're going to head out on this journey again. But it has to be the comfortable domestic setting. You almost wonder why they didn't do this when they were in the last homely house.
I wonder.
But
maybe they were
probably
too
because the
comfortable
Elvish music. They couldn't sing over the Elvish music.
Probably so. This just doesn't.
Stinking elves singing all the time.
You couldn't mix it with
Tra-la-la-lally. I can't rhyme with that.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Anyway.
It'd be like the worst DJ set in all of Middle Earth, trying to play those 2 together.
Oh, goodness. Now we get after the actual poem, we get the rest of Bilbo. We get interesting that Beorn's words that Gandalf relates to us, we don't, as an audience as the reader, I should say, we don't see Beorn saying those words. We see Gandalf saying Beorn said those words. I don't know what to make of that. I assume that's because as we're seeing this story through Bilbo's eyes, Bilbo had fallen asleep and was not aware
when
Beorn said before he left.
Yeah.
And that's probably all that there is, but it's just interesting that, once again, it's just another reminder, we're seeing this through the eyes of Bilbo.
A limited narrator. He's not an omniscient narrator.
Exactly, the limited narrator.
Yeah.
At least when he's not breaking the fourth wall and saying, well, but, then there's this.
Yeah. Well, I even think of this book as having sort of, it's narrated by Bilbo, but then it's also narrated by the translator, who inserts his own little.
That's the omniscient portion.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Because
that's a good point. You're right.
When he introduces things like the whistle of an engine coming out of a tunnel, that's clearly
that's certainly not a Bilbo narration.
That's clearly the translator. This fictionalized Tolkien that I think we talked about when we talked about the frame narrative. But
man, that was an interesting episode.
Fun.
Again, that's a Patreon exclusive, folks. We did about an hour-long discussion on frame narrative. That if you want to be a member of the let me try that again. A member of the Fellowship of the Podcast at the Gift of Gondor or higher, you'll be able to listen to that.
Yep.
So, when Beorn said that, was he trying to protect the dwarves from himself or from other bears? I don't know. I mean, that's just a question that came to mind. Is he basically saying, I can't control myself, or is it, hey, I'm going to be hanging out with a bunch of bears and I can't tell them what to do? I don't know.
I like to think he's protecting them from himself. You
Yeah.
know, we talked a little bit about, I almost hate to use this analogy, but, kind of the werewolf trope. Beorn being a werebear. And there's always that stay away from me when it's the full moon.
Right.
And I almost get a sense of that.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely do. The reason I ask is when we get that quote later, or that description later about when they go outside, they find all those bear tracks. That clearly there'd been some great meeting of bears. And I wondered if maybe instead of trying to protect them from himself, he was just saying, look, I'm going to be here, but so will about a dozen other bears or more, and you don't want to be here.
Could be.
But I don't know. I think you're probably right. It's more, look, I don't know what I do. I'm not fully in control of myself.
I can't control myself when I'm in this state, yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde sort of thing, too, yeah.
Because I feel like later, well, we'll get to it in a little bit, but I feel like later on he kind of pokes fun at Bilbo for the idea that the bears would come back and hurt him.
Or that he would, I think.
Or that he would.
I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see.
You're right.
We'll get there in a bit. We'll talk about it in a bit.
So speaking of his sleep that was disturbed, the bed itself, he is totally snuggled into them gladly. This was a comfortable little bed. Mm-hmm. He loved it,
Yeah.
The fire, he's getting a good night's sleep until he wakes up and hears the growling.
the scuffling of a bear outside the door.
Scuffling and it's different than shambling, and it's different than what was scuttling.
What was the other one?
So we got scuttling, shambling, and scuffling. Gollum shambled.
Scuttled.
Bilbo scuttled,
Gollum shambled.
and now the bear is scuffling. Love that. Great word choices. They really are. So the next day, you're going to read us about the next day. Why don't we go ahead and get you there?
It was full morning when he awoke. One of the dwarves had fallen over him in the shadows where he lay, and had rolled down with a bump from the platform onto the floor. It was Beaufort, and he was grumbling about it when Bilbo opened his eyes. "Get up, lazy bones," he said, "or there will be no breakfast left for you." Up jumped Bilbo.
Well, yeah.
"Breakfast!" he cried. "Where is breakfast?" "Mostly inside us," answered the other dwarves who were moving about the hall. "But what is left is out on the veranda. We've been about looking for Beorn ever since the sun got up, but there's no sign of him anywhere, though we found breakfast late as soon as we went out." "Where is Gandalf?" asked Bilbo, moving off to find something to eat as quick as he could. "Oh, out and about somewhere," they told him. But he saw no sign of the wizard all that day until the evening. Just before sunset he walked into the hall, where the Hobbit and the dwarves were having supper, waited on by Beorn's wonderful animals, as they had been all day. Of Beorn they had seen and heard nothing since the night before, and they were getting puzzled.
Beorn's Wonderful Animals. There's a name for a band.
Beorn's
Wonderful Animals.
Yeah.
I just love that. I don't know why.
They would do all Middle-earth, werebear-themed tunes. We would add them to the discussion that we had last time about the music inspired by Tolkien.
There you go. Absolutely.
I saw Beorn's Wonderful Animals in 18, man. They were great.
I love, again, the hospitality. A breakfast has been laid out for them. Not that the dwarves are hospitable. They would have eaten all of it and left Bilbo to starve if he'd slept any longer.
I know. I almost wonder if they didn't wake him up because they were afraid that he would eat everything.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't want to wake that guy up until we've had our share, because otherwise he will not stop. That man can. That little hobbit can eat, boy.
Yeah.
Of course, they have no idea where Beorn is, no idea where Gandalf is. But they're, trying to enjoy themselves at least. I love this. Well, we're not going to read it. I love what happens. So Gandalf shows up just around dinner time. Mm-hmm. And the first thing he says is basically, don't ask me any questions until after I've eaten. It's kind of like me, actually. Yeah. Don't talk to me until I've had something to eat.
I can't.
I'm hangry, man.
Don't bother me. Just let me eat.
Gandalf is hangry here, and he does a full-blown carb load, 2 whole loaves of bread with
butter and honey.
Just a ton of butter and honey and clotted cream. And then, good golly, a quart of mead. It's a good thing he had 2 loaves of bread to absorb all that.
I mean, I don't know how many people out there are familiar with mead because it's not exactly everywhere these days. Though it's getting it's getting more popular.
I mean, you can get some pretty weird beers, and you can get IPAs here. But
mead is getting a little bit more popular in some places. But mead it's an ancient beverage. It's an ancient one of the oldest alcoholic beverages, and it's made from honey. But I mean, it can vary in strength from like beer strength to about wine strength, but most of them today are more like wine strength.
Oh, yeah.
So I can't help thinking that Gandalf has drunk the equivalent of like a quart of wine. Which, when you consider that a bottle of wine is like, 750 milliliters, that's like a bottle and a third of wine.
Bottle and a half? Yeah, that's crazy, man.
I mean, he's got to be... He's 3 sheets to the wind at this point.
He's at least 2 sheets, no doubt.
Even for a wizard,
he better not drive Beorn's horse
even
tonight.
Even with the blood of a Maya, he's got to have a pretty high BAC at this point.
Don't take the horse; you'll kill yourself.
Man.
No
wonder he just sits there and just blows smoke rings for a while because he's just trying to keep the room from spinning.
I mean, this is kind of, I'm picturing him sounding more like this. I'll answer the second question first, but bless me.
Bless me. This is a splendid place. Yeah, exactly.
For smoke rings or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man.
And yet he certainly sounds sober enough in the next paragraph.
Does,
But unbelievable. I mean, he's totally preoccupied with these smoke rings, by the way. He's been gone all day.
Yeah.
And he comes back and is like, don't bother me, I'm eating. And then, don't bother me, I'm blowing smoke rings.
And at first I was thinking maybe is he stalling for dramatic effect, or is he just kind of like taking a moment to take pleasure in the little things?
I think it's that. I think he's having a little fun. I mean, especially when you see how crazy these are. All the colors and descriptions and how they join into figure eights.
I don't know. I'm starting to think he's just trying to stop the room from spinning long enough to tell his tale.
Yeah, he said, yeah, that's a good point.
Nobody talk. Nobody talk. Hang on, I just got to stare at the smoke rings for a minute.
I better not say anything important yet.
Okay, man. I feel better now. I can talk now.
Sir, how many meads have you had tonight? Just 2. 2. I've had 2 meads tonight, sir.
2 pints.
All right. 2 pints. Yeah, 2 pints of, my goodness, that's a lot of mead. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and take that next paragraph here where he explains what he's been doing. I've been picking out bear tracks, he said at last. There must have been a regular bears meeting outside here last night. I soon saw that Beorn could not have made them all. There were far too many of them, and they were of various sizes, too. I should say there were little bears, large bears, ordinary bears, and gigantic big bears, all dancing outside from dark to nearly dawn. They came from almost every direction, except from the west over the river from the mountains. In that direction only one set of footprints led. None coming, only ones going away from here. I followed these as far as the Carrack. There they disappeared into the river, but the water was too deep and strong beyond the rock for me to cross. It is easy enough, as you remember, to get from this bank to the Carrack by the ford, but on the other side is a cliff standing up from a swirling channel. I had to walk miles before I found a place where the river was wide and shallow enough for me to wade and swim, and then miles back again to pick up the tracks again. By that time it was too late for me to follow them far. They went straight off in the direction of the pine woods, on the east side of the Misty Mountains, where we had a pleasant little party with the wargs the night before last. And now I think I've answered your first question, too, ended Gandalf, and he sat a long while silent.
Yeah.
Man, that's something. So that's what I was talking about when we mentioned Beorn earlier in the bears, right? That's where I kind of got the
exactly,
idea that
yeah.
maybe Beorn was just protecting them from these other bears, especially the dancing bears.
That could be. I mean, I guess I didn't think about it that way because I thought of them just kind of going off to go deal with the wargs, which is clearly what they did here.
Yeah. Well, only one of them went and dealt with the wargs.
Let's see.
Because only one set of footprints led, and that was and that's Beorn himself.
You're right. Okay.
I think it was just a conversation of some sort, some sort of bear committee meeting.
Coming, only one's going away from here, so I wasn't sure if that was
only one set of
like
footprints.
one animal's footprints, or like okay.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Only one set of footprints.
I don't know if that's like one animal, like one bear, like just
but
Beorn,
one's plural.
Or if he had the other bears just kind of following him, like if they're in single file or something. I don't know.
That the one, yeah. Who knows? I don't know.
But
we'll find out,
at any rate, lots of reasons why nobody should be leaving the house after dark.
Yeah, mostly because Beorn himself told you not to. That's really a good enough reason. I love that there's a mix of bears. And it's not like there were brown bears and black bears and grizzly bears. No, there were little bears, large bears, regular bears, gigantic bears.
All dancing outside
and they were
from
all
dark
dancing.
to nearly dawn, which is just adorable.
I think North Polar Bear was probably there.
Yeah.
Yeah. NPB made it from far away.
It was a long flight. Boy, are my arms tired.
My arms tired. That's exactly what
The Lord of the Eagles dropped me over there. Good old NPB.
And he's not named Gwyer.
No. Good old NPB. I love him.
Good old NPB. I love that guy.
But there is something just kind of adorable for a brief moment about, all these bears dancing from dark till nearly dawn.
Yeah. Never mind that they would eat you, they would shred you into bloody ribbons in seconds if you stepped outside.
You would see them, they would be adorable, and it would be the last thing you would see before the mess of your entrails that just got ripped out.
Yeah, you might see that before you fade off. Well, those are supposed to be inside.
Okay. Not those kind of bears.
That's what they look like. Oh, goodness.
I just got a Winnie the Pooh thing in my head again. These are the wrong sorts of bees. All right.
Oh, my goodness. Well, as long as Tigger's there, I'm all good.
Yeah.
So, I love Bilbo's reaction. We're not going to read it, but Bilbo's like, well, now he's going to go bring the wargs, and he's going to bring them all here, and we're going to get killed. And Gandalf's like, are you not paying any attention?
You? No.
I'm drunk, but you're nuts.
I do love I love the narrator's very diplomatic way of saying this. Bilbo thought he knew what the wizard meant. Which means he completely didn't.
He had no idea. Totally misunderstood.
Great.
Man. Yeah, the Hobbit felt quite crushed.
Your
I'm very, very embarrassed. Says the drunk man. I mean, really. So they go to sleep. So now we're talking, this is the second time they're going to sleep. And this time he has a dream of bears that are dancing. And then he hears the same, and this time we get 3 awesome words. Well, we get growling too, but scraping, scuffling, and snuffling. Yeah. Oh, love that.
They're all such they're all such onomatopoeic words,
They really are, yeah. And this time he's had a dream, and I thought, is there anything there? And I don't think there is, but it's on his mind.
He can't shake this image of these bears, and I think it's clear that he went to sleep thinking about these bears being just outside the door, and that can't be comfortable.
Right. No, that's not. I mean, not unless you double check that door, and you're like, there's no way they can get in here, and even then. But you got the next passage at Beorn's bed and breakfast.
Next morning, they were all wakened by Beorn himself. "So here you all are still," he said. He picked up the Hobbit and laughed. "Not eaten up by wargs, or goblins, or wicked bears yet, I see." And he poked Mr. Baggins's waistcoat most disrespectfully. "Little Bunny is getting nice and fat again on bread and honey," he chuckled. "Come and have some more." So they all went to breakfast with him. Beorn was most jolly for a change. Indeed, he seemed to be in a splendidly good humor, and set them all laughing with his funny stories. Nor did they have to wonder long where he had been, or why he was so nice to them, for he told them himself. He had been over the river, and right back up into the mountains, from which you can guess that he could travel quickly, in bear's shape at any rate. From the burnt wolf glade he had soon found out that part of their story was true, but he had found more than that. He had caught a warg and goblin, wandering in the woods. From these he had got news. The goblin patrols were still hunting with wargs for the dwarves, and they were fiercely angry because of the death of the great goblin, and also because of the burning of the chief wolf's nose, and the death from the wizard's fire of many of his chief servants.
There is that.
I love the burning of the chief wolf's nose. I don't know why, that one's just funny.
I know. Because that's exactly parallel with the death of the great goblin. Like, it's set up to be an equal value.
So much they told him when he forced them, but he guessed there was more wickedness than this afoot, and that a great raid of the whole goblin army with their wolf allies into the lands shadowed by the mountains might soon be made to find the dwarves, or to take vengeance on the men and creatures that lived there, and who they thought must be sheltering them.
Oh my. Bunches of little things to unpack. We get another reference to Bilbo as a rabbit.
Yeah, I know, little bunny.
It's getting a little silly.
Yeah. Also note that, Beorn clearly knows that Bilbo suspected him of coming back to eat them.
Almost by word. I mean, he's exactly saying, he even says not eaten up by wargs. You really thought I was going to bring those guys back.
Yeah. That's got to be awkward for Bilbo. He's talking about his host behind his back, and his host...
and his host is a bear.
Obviously heard him in bear form, or heard about it at least.
Yeah, I suspect Gandalf probably was laughing about it.
Would you believe what this guy thought?
So here you all are still. Well, yeah, it was buy 2 nights, get the third night free at Beorn's Bed and Breakfast. Special deal. By the way, the one bummer deal about breakfast here is there's no bacon.
No, that is true.
Now, we did have some folks talk about the differences between the bacon that we eat here and the bacon that Tolkien
that's
might have been referring to.
English bacon.
Probably should have mentioned that.
English back bacon, a bit more like what we call Canadian bacon, which
bacon.
I should have known. I know I've had...
Which is, and I did, because I think I
had bacon in England before.
Yeah, I've had a rasher of bacon at a pub, and it was like, this isn't bacon.
I mean, I've had English, I've been to England, I've had traditional English breakfast, and I should have known.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I see bacon.
And I thought about that too.
I'm thinking of my own bacon.
Oh, of course, because my own bacon is, well, let's be clear, better. I like Canadian bacon. I love it on my pizza with pineapple. I love it, but it's not bacon.
But it's still so good that I would never put it back on the shelf. I
still agree with that. I still would not.
I'm not sure there are many pork products that I would say, I'm going to eat that.
Not.
No, I don't need that one extra piece.
I don't need that whole rack of ribs. I just need 2.
Right. Yeah.
I have never said.
Ever said that.
Never, as Alan said. But yeah, so this is, the vegetarian breakfast, but that's okay. I mean, bread and honey is not a bad idea.
Are, pretty good.
Man, there's a barbecue place we go to that brings out these buttermilk biscuits and honey and
that sounds good.
It's good stuff.
Well, now I'm getting hungry.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I love that he's in a great mood. He's jolly. This is he's really, something's gone right, because he's not just unangry. He's actually flat out happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's because, why is he happy? It's because he's found out all these things. Yeah. He's found out that the story was true. And I love this. At first we just hear that he'd caught a warg and a goblin. From these he'd got news. That's all we get. It's only later that we found out that he forced them. They don't say anything stronger than that, but you gotta imagine it's
some enhanced interrogation techniques.
Some enhanced interrogation techniques. Yes. Yeah. Yes. I'm thinking there's some. Yeah. I don't think, honestly, and I hate to say this of him, but I don't think torture was beyond him.
Not for goblins and wargs. No.
No.
I mean, he is absolutely gleeful about dismembering.
Totally.
Yeah.
Woohoo, this is my favorite thing to do.
Yeah.
I have a hobby. I skin wargs.
But at least he did get some good intelligence from them, I have to say.
And he did, yeah. Yeah, he did. Yeah, I love this. But now, and even though we're not reading that part, I love the next line. I like your story. Better now, I am sure it is true.
Yeah.
And that's the point. He was, like we talked about last episode,
time. Yeah,
skeptical.
If you lived as
there's
near
the line
as
right
I
there.
do, you wouldn't take There it is. That's exactly what you said. The word of no one you didn't know as well as your brother or better.
Exactly. And that's huge, and totally understandable. Where you live this is not a safe place.
Right.
You would only trust the most trustable people. But he really does like their story.
But look what it's earned them. He's hurried home to make sure they're safe, and he's going to offer any help that he can.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
he's going to think more kindly of dwarves after this. I mean,
Yeah, I shall think more kindly of dwarves. Killed the great goblin. That's why he will think more kindly of dwarves.
Yep.
Not just that they, got through the mountains and hung out with me and told me a great story. It's that they killed the great goblin.
Yeah, this is
never mind that was actually Gandalf, but
Well, that's true, but
yeah,
still, they set that whole thing up.
They as a group, yes. I love this though when Bilbo, what did you do with the goblin and warg? I mean, you
Bilbo, why did you ask this question, dude? I mean.
And you could just see Beorn just grinning from ear to ear. Come and see.
Yes, I know.
Let me show you.
Just the pure
You're still dripping
glee.
blood.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've got no problem with that. But this reminds us of something that Gandalf says. I think he says it later, that Beorn was a fierce enemy. I mean,
it says right here in the
oh, there it is.
Yeah,
It's
Beorn
right there.
was
It's
a
not
fierce enemy.
And now he was
understating it.
That is understating it. That really is. And it's, again, I think this is part of that wild thing. We talked about wild, domesticated, civilized, that kind of thing. This is a reminder that Beorn is dangerous. Beorn is wild. He is his own law.
Yeah. Yeah.
He doesn't abide by anybody else's rules. He doesn't need to.
That's true.
But we see evidence of that here.
Yeah. But now he is their friend, and just think of what a significant accomplishment that is for the dwarves.
Absolutely.
To have gotten this guy on their side. I mean, this is not a guy you want as your enemy, and it was fine when he was indifferent towards them. But now that he's their friend...
Oh, it's awesome.
That's awesome.
What an ally to have, right? And in fact, now that he's going to be their ally, we're going to find out what he's going to do. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up this the next bit. This is what he promised to do for them. He would provide ponies for each of them, and a horse for Gandalf, for their journey to the forest. And he would lade them with food to last them for weeks with care, and packed so as to be as easy as possible to carry. Nuts, flour, sealed jars of dried fruits, and red earthenware pots of honey. And twice-baked cakes that would keep good a long time, and on a little of which they could march far. The making of these was one of his secrets, but honey was in them, as in most of his foods, and they were good to eat, though they made one thirsty. Water, he said, they would not need to carry this side of the forest, for there were streams and springs along the road.
But your way through Mirkwood is dark, dangerous, and difficult,
he said.
Water is not easy to find there, nor food. The time has not yet come for nuts, though it may be past and gone indeed before you get to the other side. And nuts are about all that grows there fit for food. In there, the wild things are dark, queer, and savage. I will provide you with skins for carrying water, and I will give you some bows and arrows. But I doubt very much whether anything you find in Mirkwood will be wholesome to eat or to drink. There is one stream there, I know, black and strong, which crosses the path. That you should neither drink of nor bathe in, for I have heard that it carries enchantment and a great drowsiness and forgetfulness. And in the dim shadows of that place, I don't think you'll shoot anything, wholesome or unwholesome, without straying from the path. That you must not do for any reason. That is all the advice I can give you. Beyond the edge of the forest, I cannot help you much. You must depend on your luck and your courage and the food I send with you. At the gate of the forest, I must ask you to send back my horse and my ponies. But I wish you all speed, and my house is open to you, if ever you come back this way again.
Man,
now
let me
I'm
just
gonna
say I
need to
love
drink
your
about
Beorn voice.
gallons of water.
I know that couldn't have been easy, but it sounds great.
Well, I was trying to find something unique for him, and I can't just say deep voice because I do that for just about everybody now. That's terrible.
He's got kind of like a 500-foot tall Sam Elliott thing going on.
It's kind of, I like that, a 500-foot tall Sam Elliott deal. I like it. I can't tell you how many times I look at a VO script and some potential client wants it. I want this to sound like Sam Elliott, or I want this to sound like James Earl Jones. And you're like, dude, your budget is 1/100th of those people, so good luck with that.
Yeah.
But I can give you a 500-foot tall version.
Right.
Fun stuff, though. That was fun. Great content, though. I mean, this is really, really cool. I love the food, specifically these twice-baked cakes that would keep a long time and on which they could march far. It kind of sounds like somewhere in between cram and limbus.
Yeah, definitely.
Right? I mean, it's better than cram because cram does not taste good, but it does give you that energy. And, of course, it's clearly not limbus.
Right, yeah.
But it's somewhere in the middle. It's a really long-lasting, calorie-dense.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there are a couple
They sound good.
There are a couple of, like, in the real world, there are a couple of twice-baked, breads that like, there's...
Because that would make it keep a lot longer,
Yeah,
wouldn't it?
yeah, it kind of dries it out, makes it hard and dry. I mean, there's like Zwieback. Which I think is actually German for twice-baked. But there's also, I mean, the word biscuit actually means twice-baked. So, you could probably imagine...
Oh, does it really?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it does. And I wouldn't think
goodness.
like what we in America call a biscuit, but probably more like a cookie, or a biscotti or something like that. And that's kind of what I imagine here, but I love that, there's this honey in them. And it definitely echoes cram, which I guess we'll see later, and limbus, which we'll certainly see later in Lord of the Rings, but we've already seen in the Silmarillion.
Yeah. And, of course, you can dip these twice-baked cakes in the earthenware pots of honey for a little extra honey punch.
Oh, yeah, you could. But don't dip them in the Mirkwood stream, even though it's black and strong the way I like my coffee.
Yeah, that's not you don't want your water to look like your coffee. Really. No. That's bad water.
No.
And he's basically telling them, look, there's nothing.
Honestly, now I can't help thinking of the oily water that is in Mordor in Lord of the Rings, which is sort of inspired by the Somme.
Yeah, Battle of the Somme. Of course, that was like
and I don't know
the least of their concerns, but
yeah, that's true. I don't know if the Mirkwood water is supposed to be quite that nasty, but probably not far off. I mean,
it carries a great drowsiness and forgetfulness.
That's true, and this is something that I do think we'll be touching more on next.
Oh yes,
in the next chapter.
In a future chapter,
this stream is a powerful mythical symbol that I want to really dive into.
We'll be spending some time in it. Well, we don't literally want to dive into the stream. You want to avoid that.
Yes, I should have chosen my metaphor more carefully.
We want to explore the stream while staying on its shore.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting that he doesn't think you're going to be able to shoot anything, good or bad, without getting off the path, and then he makes it very clear, do not do this.
Yeah.
And you kind of have a feeling like when Beorn says that you must not do, and it's in capital letters.
Yeah.
There's got to be some...
that's scary.
Yeah.
If this guy is scared of it.
Yeah, do not do this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because, of course, he understands what an enchantment is because he's under his own, but he's under an enchantment. It may be his own enchantment, but it's an enchantment. So he knows enchantment.
Yeah, that's true.
Now he doesn't know that. He's only heard it.
It's like it takes an enchanted creature to understand. Yeah, exactly.
I don't know who he heard it from, but, travelers or something. But this idea that he's heard that it carries this enchantment, I'm sure he's able to identify it. Somebody comes along and says, man, I forgot everything. One of our guys fell in and didn't wake up. Oh, that's an enchantment,
Yeah.
Because he would have recognized it, of course. And we'll talk more about that when we get there as to the source of that enchantment, the purpose of that enchantment, all that sort of fun stuff. Should be a good conversation. But, of course, we find out that they will be able to shoot things initially, or at least shoot at things without straying from the path.
True.
Whether you hit or not is another story.
Right.
But I love the last paragraph there. Beyond the edge of the forest, I can't help you much. You must depend on your luck and your courage. And the food I send with you. But again, we come back to kind of that, with good management and good luck, I've brought you this far.
Yeah, the luck. You're going to need luck.
Yeah,
but
you'll
you're
need
also
both.
going to need your own, your own will.
Exactly. Don't
will to go
rely
on.
solely on fate. Don't just assume that fate is going to accomplish this for you.
Yeah.
You still have to do it yourself, but you'll have to have some luck along the way as well.
Yeah. And that reminds me a bit of the Corey Olson observation about how this idea of luck and this interplay of luck and will becomes more prominent as the story goes on. We really are seeing much more of the interplay.
Exactly. And I think that's why I got so frustrated with that theme being being countered in the films. I know that, again, I'm not trying to bash them, just saying that's why I bashed them. Does that maybe explain it a little better?
No, I was right. I was right there with
yeah.
you. I mean, I think in our last episode, when I saw that there is an element of the character's own resourcefulness, their own their own will to go on, I started to think, well, maybe there is an element of making their own luck, but I don't know. I still think it was downplayed. I still think the role of true luck.
It's the courage.
Fate, providence. I think it was downplayed.
It's that dichotomy of having to have both, of not being able to just sit back and let fate accomplish its goals through you. It's you're going to have fate intervene, but you got to have courage too. Or as Gandalf said, with good management, you've got to be wise and do the good things, do the right thing, and then where necessary, luck will help you out.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
But worth noting that there is an element of making your own luck.
Sure,
I think that's fair.
Yeah,
probably more fair than I was towards the idea when we talked about the movie, but it's both. It really is both,
yeah,
and I think that's the important thing.
Yeah, it's not one or the other. It's definitely A and B, not A or B. I also the little thread about send back my. I mean, he doesn't threaten anything. He just asks you. I must ask you to send back my horse and my ponies. I think when Beorn asks you, you should probably take note.
You should
make sure
do
that you
what he says.
Do what he asks. Probably a wise idea.
And again, this is a guy that he started out indifferent towards them. Now he's their friend. You don't want to throw that away.
Don't make him your enemy. No. Keep him as your ally. He is, and boy, he will prove to be that at the end, won't he?
Yeah, he will.
So, well, their little 3-day weekend at Beorn's. Is that weekend at Beorn's?
B&B?
No, I was thinking weekend at Beorn's instead of weekend at Bernie's.
Oh, man.
But this is a 3-day weekend.
Except they're carrying around a dead goblin.
Oh, goodness.
I was thinking Beorn's Bed and Breakfast, the BBB.
Yeah, the BBB to go along with the PPP.
Right, exactly.
It's the
what did you do
BBB
all
on the
weekend? I hung out at
PPP.
the BBB listening to the PPP.
Wow.
Played a little D&D.
While renewing my AAA.
See? We could do this all night. Or
Oh,
at least,
man. Let's not. Let's
20-something more times.
Yeah, that's true. You will run out of letters eventually. Oh, goodness. So they have lunch with him one last time and get ready to head out. So I'm going to have you read the next section that we've marked.
All that morning they were busy with preparations. Soon after midday they ate with Beorn for the last time, and after the meal they mounted the steeds he was lending them, and bidding him many farewells, they rode off through his gate at a good pace. As soon as they left his high hedges at the east of his fenced lands, they turned north, and then bore to the northwest. By his advice they were no longer making for the main forest road to the south of his land. Had they followed the pass, their path would have led them down a stream from the mountains that joined the great river miles south of the Carrick. At that point there was a deep ford which they might have passed if they had still had their ponies, and beyond that a track led to the skirts of the wood and to the entrance of the old forest road. But Beorn had warned them that that way was now often used by the goblins, while the forest road itself, he had heard, was overgrown and disused at the eastern end, and led to impassable marshes where the paths had long been lost. Its eastern opening had also always been far to the south of the lonely mountain, and would have left them still with a long and difficult northward march when they got to the other side. North of the Carrick, the edge of Mirkwood drew closer to the borders of the great river, and though here the mountains too drew down nearer, Beorn advised them to take this way. For at a place a few days' ride due north of the Carrick was the gate of a little-known pathway through Mirkwood that led almost straight towards the lonely mountain.
Well, that's convenient.
It is.
But again, this advice itself is another example of that luck. If they had not gone so far to the north after their detour, they might not have come to Beorn at all. In fact,
That's a
they
good
wouldn't
point,
have. Remember, Gandalf says it's, kind of an accident that we're even here.
That's
They
true,
would have
yeah.
headed for that original road.
That's true. And they would have found it impassable at the end. Yeah.
And if they had if Beorn had just stayed neutral to them, I mean, well, if he'd been an enemy, they would have been eaten. But
if he'd stayed
at
neutral
least
to them, he
shredded
wouldn't have
and
given them
skinned and
this
beheaded.
advice. Yeah.
But yeah, he wouldn't have given them this advice.
Yeah.
So
That's
amazing.
a good point, yeah.
Yeah. it really is.
All these, these little decisions along the way and their luck have really set them up for success.
In this
here.
case, good decisions and luck, right? I mean, the luck that they ran into him, but the good decision to be honest and tell him the truth, and that ended up, persuading him to believe them and to help them. So
Yeah. Notice he doesn't say it's an elf path, which
no, I know.
if you look at the map in the back of the book, it is clearly labeled as the elf path.
The elf path, yeah.
He's
That's
probably
true. It's
smart
the
not to
book
tell the
and
dwarves, hey, take this elf path.
That's a very good point. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I want to take an elf path. Especially because, Thorin's got to know about the Elven King.
Oh,
and his attitude
absolutely,
towards
yeah.
dwarves.
They would have been neighbors, once upon a time.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure he rode by in his moose every now and then.
The battle elk.
The battle
Or
elk.
battle moose, whatever it was. I don't know my meese from my
It
meese.
is some sort
Did
of
I just say my
massive-
meese? Wow.
You said your meese, dude. I might actually repeat that. I might find a way to loop that. I don't know. That was really hilarious.
My meese. I don't know my
meese.
mooses from my elks is what I meant to say. Not my meeses.
I'm not sure either. I'm sure somebody has identified that animal, that fictional animal that was featured in the films, but all I can remember is that it was apparently large enough to have, 8 orcs dangling from it so that they could all be beheaded at once.
Yeah.
Because that's a very sharp sword and a very strong arm to behead 8 orcs at once. Not physically possible, mind you, but we're not gonna pick at that.
Not at all. We've
Not at all.
We've done that actually.
We have. This is like going out to the warg whose skin is hanging outside Beorn's house.
Yeah.
And poking at it with a stick.
Gleefully.
We've already killed you. We've already skinned you, but I'm still gonna poke at you
Yeah.
now and then. Anyway, no, I'm sorry.
No, I agree with our
only a
listeners who have said, all right, just focus
I
on the
know.
books.
And that's what we try to
Quit.
do.
Yeah.
So he does
We're
tell
getting
him
better,
we are.
I think.
Okay, so he wraps us up with a little bit more advice, reminding them that the goblins aren't going to cross the river
Right.
Anywhere near the Carrock. But he does tell them to keep moving quickly because eventually they'll get to the edge of the forest, and wargs are faster than the horses you've got.
Right, yeah.
So, he sends them off, and they're moving quickly, trying to put as many miles between them and Beorn's house. And sure enough, they make camp, set a guard, and
They start to get kind of comfortable again, don't they?
except for the dreams, the howl of hunting wolves and the
There
cries of
is
goblins.
that, but it becomes difficult to think about the pursuing goblins behind, and then they start to talk and sing again and forget the dark forest path that lay in front.
That's so dwarven, isn't it? I mean, that's just what they do.
Yeah,
It
that's
really
true.
is.
They do this over and over again. Every time things get a little bit easier, they kind of forget about all the difficult things in front of them.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'm going to go ahead and take the next little bit here as we get into the writing itself. If we haven't gotten to we haven't gotten to the fact that it's been 4 days. That's the next part. That's where we're headed.
I think
next.
you're
just
right.
want to make sure. Yeah, that is third evening and fourth day. Yeah. All right, here we go. Still, the next morning dawned bright and fair again. There was an autumn-like mist white upon the ground, and the air was chill. But soon the sun rose red in the east, and the mists vanished, and while the shadows were still long, they were off again. So they rode now for 2 more days, and all the while they saw nothing save grass and flowers and birds and scattered trees, and occasionally small herds of red deer, browsing, or sitting at noon in the shade. Sometimes Bilbo saw the horns of the harts sticking up out of the long grass, and at first he thought they were the dead branches of trees. That third evening they were so eager to press on, for Beorn had said that they should reach the forest gate early on the fourth day, that they rode still forward after dusk and into the night beneath the moon. As the light faded, Bilbo thought he saw, away to the right or to the left, the shadowy form of a great bear prowling along in the same direction. But if he dared to mention it to Gandalf, the wizard only said,
Hush, take no notice.
Next day they started before dawn, though their night had been short. As soon as it was light, they could see the forest coming, as it were, to meet them, or waiting for them, like a black and frowning wall before them. The land began to slope up, and it seemed to the hobbit that a silence began to draw in upon them. Birds began to sing less. There were no more deer. Not even rabbits were to be seen. By the afternoon they had reached the eaves of Mirkwood, and were resting almost beneath the great overhanging boughs of its outer trees. Their trunks were huge and gnarled, their branches twisted, their leaves were dark and long. Ivy grew on them, and trailed along the ground.
Well, here is Mirkwood, said Gandalf, the greatest of the forests of the northern world. I hope you like the look of it. I must send back these excellent ponies you borrowed.
The dwarves were inclined to grumble at this, but the wizard told them they were fools.
Beorn is not as far off as you seem to think, and you had better keep your promises anyway, for he is a bad enemy. Mr. Baggin's eyes are sharper than yours if you have not seen each night after dark a great bear going along with us, or sitting far off in the moon watching our camps. Not only to guard you and guide you, but to keep an eye on the ponies, too. Beorn may be your friend, but he loves his animals as his children. You do not guess what kindness he has shown you in letting dwarves ride them so far and so fast, nor what would happen to you if you tried to take them into the forest.
Well, that's
You'd think
scary.
they would, know better, but...
Yeah. You'd think they'd jump off the horses and just go now.
Yeah, it's
you don't have to tell me anything more.
But Gandalf,
I did think...
Gandalf has to remind him.
Gandalf does have to remind them. Would they be beheaded and skinned like the Goblin and Warg? I mean, really,
it's not unlikely.
It's not out of the realm of possibilities, certainly.
Yeah.
I love that this description that he loves his animals as his children.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the first time I read this book, I was a child myself. I probably have only read this once or twice in the last 5 years since I've become a father. I can say that if as much as I love my children, I can now imagine what he means.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't have imagined that before, and I know you probably couldn't have either.
Yeah,
That's an
true.
intense love.
Yeah. I mean, I remember
it's
having pets before I had children, and I remember how much
Yeah.
I've always loved my
Yeah.
pets. But it's
Sure.
it's different.
Children are different.
Children,
Yeah.
It's different with children. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if he loves his animals as his children, you do not want to mess with these animals.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a way of saying you may be his friends now, but these are his family.
This is his family. Yeah. You're important to him, but you're nothing like these.
Mm-hmm.
These are much more important. I also thought that the landscape description was really well done. That's why I actually selected that much of the passage to read, because we get this beautiful landscape that starts to turn
It
ominous.
starts to turn really grim. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I love that the forest looms up like a black and frowning wall. That's such a potent image.
Isn't that a visual?
Yeah.
Yeah, it really
I mean,
is.
you see the sense. I mean, the fact that it's described as a wall, it really gives you a sense of a threshold.
Yeah, it does.
And it's the frowning. It kind of gives the forest a personality, doesn't it? It almost becomes
it does.
a character,
Threatening,
an antagonist.
yeah.
who's threatening him.
As we'll see soon,
Absolutely.
it really is. It
Yeah.
is its own character, no doubt.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is the first hint of that, isn't it?
And then the quiet around it. The fact that there's no deer, there's no rabbits.
Not even the rabbits.
The sinister nature of the forest seems to spread out so that even the lands
The
around
gnarled
it
trunks
are,
and even the ivy
Yeah.
feels kind of creepy.
Yeah. even the land around it is creepy and quiet and kind of dead in a way.
Yeah. There's like a
I shouldn't say dead
boundary
because
land.
it's, the forest is, the trees in the
Yeah,
forest are alive, but
they're
there's,
alive, but not the green, lovely
Exactly,
life of
yeah.
the grass and the flowers and the deer
Yeah,
and
that's what I'm thinking.
where the deer and the antelope play. Where seldom is heard a discouraging
word.
word.
The skies are not cloudy all day.
All day. We're probably gonna have to explain that to our non-U.S. Listeners, which is like a third of our folks, but they might.
They probably
all it takes is seeing one Western film, and you've heard that.
Yeah, they heard Home on the Range. Yeah.
Okay, so interestingly, though, I'm going to have you skip a little bit. We find out that Gandalf's not going to send his horse back, which is like, wait a minute, what did you just say? Is this like the most hypocritical thing in the world, Gandalf? I'm sorry, you're what?
Yeah.
Well, then you better get going fast, because that bear can run fast. So I wonder if he told Beorn, thank you for the horse and the ponies. By the way, I'm keeping your horse for a while.
Or maybe he said, hey, I'm coming back, so I'll make sure these ponies get back to you.
There you go. Yeah, that could be it. Right. So I'm going to go ahead and have you read the next, paragraph or two here.
All right. Then they knew that Gandalf was going to leave them at the very edge of Mirkwood, and they were in despair, but nothing they could say would change his mind. Now, we had this all out before when we landed on the Carrack, he said. It is no use arguing. I have, as I told you, some pressing business away south, and I am already late through bothering with you people. I love that.
I know, it's so funny. Bothering with you all.
We may meet again before all is over, and then again, of course, we may not. That depends on your luck and on your courage and sense. And I am sending Mr.
There it goes
Baggins
again. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah, the luck.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's like, wow, another luck and courage.
And, and courage and sense. And I am sending Mr. Baggins with you. I have told you before that he has more about them than you guess, and you will find that out before long. So chin up, Bilbo, and don't look so glum. Chin up, Thorin and company. This is your expedition, after all. Think of the treasure at the end, and forget the forest to the dragon, at any rate until tomorrow morning.
Well, just for a little while.
Just for a few hours,
Yeah.
people,
Another reference to the business away south. I know, with you people.
Politicians
get in trouble for saying that.
So much. It's just
he is. He's so
me.
condescending.
It's great.
Another reference to the business away south. So we don't get the specifics here.
No.
I think you're right. We get that specific later.
Yeah. We get it at the end of the book.
We get it way later in the Council of Elrond, don't we?
Yeah, we get more at the Council of Elrond. We'll hear a little bit more at the end of the book when Gandalf comes back. But
that's true.
But since it's not going to be for a while before we talk about it again. So this is where the White Council, Gandalf's actually going to meet with the White Council, and this is where they're going to finally talk Saruman into attacking what we know in this book is the Necromancer's stronghold, and it's Sauron at Dol Guldur, and So at the Council of Elrond, Gandalf basically says the council put forth its strength and drove the evil out of Mirkwood, and that was in the very year of the finding of the ring. A strange chance, if chance it was.
If chance it was.
And of course we know it was not.
Right.
It's interesting. If you look at Tolkien's letters, he does admit in letter 257 to Christopher Bretherton, it was really just a way to get Gandalf out of the story for a while so that the dwarves and Bilbo would have to do things for themselves. He said it was hardly more than to provide a reason for Gandalf going away and leaving Bilbo and the dwarves to fend for themselves, which was necessary for the tale. And of course it was necessary for the tale.
Exactly.
Bilbo needs to step up and be the hero, and they can't have Gandalf, fighting all their battles for them.
Otherwise, the story wouldn't be called The Hobbit; it would be called The Wizard.
The Wizard, yeah. But it's great that again, that's sort of the master retconner that Tolkien is. He's kind of, by the end of the book, he decided that he was going to have him deal with the necromancer, and then he makes that such an important part of the War of the Ring later on in Lord of the Rings. It's just a cool thing. Yeah.
I know I interrupted you in the middle of it, but the courage and sense and luck thing, I just love that. Another reminder.
That's great. I know it's amazing how often that keeps coming up, and how often
when you start being aware of it, it's there a lot. Yeah,
not just
they really
your luck,
are.
but also your luck and your courage,
or some sort of synonyms to make you understand
something that you have
there's
to do yourself, something you're responsible
fate
for.
and wisdom, or something where you got to do something. You're part of this.
Something that's the result of providence, and something that's the result of you yourself.
Yeah, the free will and agency of individuals in the story.
Yeah.
We get another mention of Bilbo having more about him than they would otherwise guess, along with an almost slightly prophetic statement that you will find that out before long. Makes you wonder what Gandalf already knows.
That's a good point.
And then, of course, they do their thing. They go ahead and they fill the skins, they unpack the ponies, they distribute the gear. They send the ponies back. Beorn looks to be following the ponies, not them.
True.
And, Gandalf's saying goodbye. By the way, we get this wonderful little narrative note. Bilbo had just gone inside the forest after breakfast, a very poor one. Because we always have to have a comment on the quality of the food.
It was barely a breakfast anyways. Nothing, not even deserving of the name.
As a breakfast. It was some nuts and a twice-baked
and a
cake.
hard biscuit.
Yeah, exactly. No fun to that. So then we get basically the farewell, and I'm going to go ahead and read this last little bit. It'll be our last read for the chapter here. Mm-hmm. Do we really have to go through? Groaned the Hobbit.
Yes, you do, said the wizard. If you want to get to the other side, you must either go through or give up your quest. And I'm not going to allow you to back out now, Mr. Baggins. I'm ashamed of you for thinking of it. You've got to look after all these dwarves for me, he laughed.
No, said Bilbo. I didn't mean that. I meant, is there no way round?
Well, there is, if you care to go 200 miles or so out of your way north, and twice that south, but you wouldn't get a safe path even then. There are no safe paths in this part of the world. Remember, you are over the edge of the wild now, and in for all sorts of fun wherever you go.
He makes it sound like freaking Disneyland. I mean, all sorts of fun wherever you go.
It's like just a few pages ago, here's Mirkwood. I hope you like the look of it.
Yeah, I know.
Like, well, no, anyway, actually, I don't.
I really don't.
But what
it's
am I
frowning
supposed to
at
do?
Me. Right. And fun? Really? You have a very odd notion of fun, Gandalf. Anyway.
I think Gandalf is he's so sick of the dwarves at this point.
He is.
That he's
he just wants them gone.
He's just mocking them to their faces.
Just let me go.
Just like,
really
I'm through bothering with you people and
people with you people.
I hope you have fun and he just gets more and more dismissive of them as time goes on.
He does, but he does give them some good advice.
He does. He loves them. He wouldn't have done this if he didn't, love and support them. I think it's interesting that he's underestimating Bilbo a little bit here.
He is.
He's saying, you can't back out.
You're not going.
I'm ashamed of you for thinking of it.
Right.
And Bilbo's like, no, I didn't mean that. Is there not another way?
Isn't there another way? Yeah, we still want to go there. Yeah. So anyway, going back to that passage.
You were in the middle of reading, and
I was, and then I
sitting
stopped.
here carrying on the conversation.
No, it's okay. I do the same thing. So he says, Gandalf, going back to Gandalf.
Before you could get round Mirkwood in the north, you'd be right among the slopes of the Grey Mountains, and they're simply stiff with goblins, hobgoblins, and orcs of the worst description. Before you could get round it in the south, you'd get into the land of the necromancer. And even you, Bilbo, won't need me to tell you tales of that black sorcerer. I don't advise you to go anywhere near the places overlooked by his dark tower. Stick to the forest track. Keep your spirits up. Hope for the best. And with a tremendous slice of luck, you may come out one day and see the long marshes lying below you, and beyond them, high in the east, the lonely mountain where dear old Smaug lives, though I hope he is not expecting you. Very comforting you are, to be sure, growled Thorin. Goodbye. If you won't come with us, you'd better get off without any more talk. Well, goodbye, then, and really goodbye, said Gandalf, and he turned his horse and rode down into the west. But he could not resist the temptation to have the last word. Before he had passed quite out of hearing, he turned and put his hands to his mouth and called to them. They heard his voice come faintly. Goodbye. Be good. Take care of yourselves. And don't leave the path.
So, do you think they should leave the path?
Well, we've only got 3 warnings, right? First he says... let's see, where was it earlier?
Well, Beorn says stay on the path, right?
Beorn says it, and then Gandalf says straight through the forest, don't stray off the track. That's right before the passage I read.
Oh, there you go, yeah.
Then he says to Bilbo, stick to the forest, well, he says to all of them, stick to the forest track for the second time, and then, or for the third time, and then for the fourth time, don't leave the path. So we have 4 different versions of
not to leave
don't
the
do
path.
this. Yeah. So, which explains exactly why the dwarves leave the path.
Right, of course. Yes. Exactly.
I do love, though, Gandalf's, like you said earlier, that, he's kind of disappointed in Baggins. I think he's joking about saying you've got to look after all these dwarves for me, which is pretty funny, but that's exactly what he ends up doing.
Exactly what ends up happening, yeah. I mean, Bilbo really becomes the leader of the party.
He does. He becomes the leader, yeah. Absolutely.
And this reminder of no safe paths anymore.
Yeah, no safe paths. You're over the edge of the wild now. And it's fun.
So there's orcs to the north of me, Sauron to the south. Here I am.
Yeah. Stuck
in the middle with you. Oh, and Smaug is in the east, if you eventually make it there.
Pretty much I want to go west. I don't want to go any of these other places.
Of course, there's goblins and mountains that way.
Well, right, yeah. Pretty much surrounded now. But in the north, the mountains are stiff with goblins, hobgoblins, and orcs. Yeah. This is the only appearance of the word orcs in The Hobbit, isn't it?
Once previously,
maybe there's another one.
They described the big goblins as the orcs of the mountains.
The orcs of the mountains.
I think that was chapter 5, yeah. But that's probably the only two.
I think so, because, here, and it took us a while. We studied about why, the whole goblin and orc thing, and how really they're the same. It's just a matter of his word choice.
Mm-hmm. But then hobgoblin is something different. I believe Anderson went into a little bit about hobgoblin.
Yeah,
I didn't pull it in my notes, but it's in Anderson's book. If folks have that, go check that out.
I think there was something about Tolkien thinking that they were bigger, but they were actually smaller.
Yeah, in researching it, I think Anderson determined that hobgoblins were actually originally smaller.
Right.
And and yet Tolkien's,
his take on it has
sort of become the more kind of accepted fantasy trope.
Yeah, exactly. Love this, the thing about the necromancer. You don't even need me to tell you how bad it is. Even Bilbo, who lived that sheltered life, even Bilbo, who didn't know anything about the wild, would have known, don't go near the necromancer's tower.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and even here, with luck and doing the right thing, sticking to the track and keep your spirits up, you may come out one day. I mean, I think he acknowledges here, look, this is not a sure thing.
Yeah.
You're going to have a lot of luck. So.
Well, it says in the last paragraph, now began the most dangerous part of all the journey.
Yeah.
That's saying something, considering
isn't
what
it?
they've been through
Especially
already.
considering they've gone through, with the goblins and the
great
wargs.
goblin and chased up a tree and, everything they've been through. And the dangerous part is just beginning.
Yeah. Boy, that's big.
That's not good.
No. So that means the dangerous part of our podcast is coming up. That's a great discussion, Sean. I really enjoyed this one again, as I think we have so far every one of these episodes. Be sure to join us again, folks, next time when we will see if the dwarves follow Gandalf and Beorn's advice. Well, we know they won't if they stray from the path.
Yeah, they will.
But you...
But we don't want you to stray just yet.
That's right.
Because we're not done with this episode. We've still got a lot more good stuff waiting for us in Barliman's bag.
Indeed we do, along with a slightly disturbing end-of-episode gag. But before we get to either of those, we still want to take another minute to ask you to consider joining our Patreon family. I know we talk about it every week, and there's a reason why we talk about it every week. We want to get to the biggest goal so that we can start doing some of those special events. But, the reason why we ask you is because we need your help. But, only if we've earned your support. We put a ton of hours into each episode. We're happy to do it. But the resources you provide are really, really helpful, and we are super
very
thankful for it.
And we are very appreciative.
Really, the move to weekly episodes could never have happened. The amount of time and effort we put into it could not be done on a weekly basis if it weren't for what you guys have done.
That's true.
And, of course, we want to make it worth your while, not just with our weekly episodes, but cool rewards like exclusive content.
Such as the postscripts to each episode. You guys hear us mention these a few times, usually every episode. We record episodes a couple of weeks in advance, as I think everyone has figured out by now, and we listen to them before they release to see if there are any jokes that fell through the cracks or anything we got wrong that we want to correct, or a thing we...
never happens.
Never at all. How many times this episode?
Or only sometimes.
Yeah. Or just things we wish we had delved into a little bit more. We put those into a short, usually about 10-minute or so postscript that's available to our Patreon supporters.
And that exclusive postscript usually releases the same day as the episode it follows. So if you want access to those bonuses, be sure to join the Fellowship of the Podcast. Also, we do exclusives like that you can become part of our Q&A episode that we do once a quarter. And we also do a quarterly special topic episode that only the Fellowship of the Podcast gets. So we want to take a moment to thank those of you who have joined. Like we said earlier, you really are helping to improve the show. And we want to give a very special shout out to Jason in British Columbia, our patron at the Kierdance contribution tier.
And while we do really appreciate your support, we don't want you to feel obligated.
No.
Only if you can afford it, and only if you think we've earned it, do we want you to sign up. Otherwise, just keep enjoying the podcast, because we'll keep making it.
That we will. So, Sean, go ahead. Let's get on with Barlowman's Bag.
Excellent. Well, today I'd like to start with a question from an old friend of the podcast, Brad T. in Sheffield.
Okay.
Brad wrote to us back when we released our episode on Peter Jackson's Hobbit movies.
Boy, that got a lot of mail.
It did. Some good, some bad, some friendly, some less so.
Yeah.
Most of it friendly. It seems like, in particular, our discussion got Brad thinking about Beorn. And so he wrote in to ask, where does Beorn and his kindred fit in terms of the rest of the legendarium?
Oh, my.
So, by now, we've spent 2 episodes talking about Beorn, and I think we've gotten through virtually everything there is to say about him until the end of The Hobbit, when we find out what happens to him next. There's really not much else to say, unfortunately. You know, Appendix F to Lord of the Rings does say that the Beornings were descended from the Edain of the First Age, or from their close kin, and that's why they spoke the Westron language. So Beorn was of the Edain, and probably he was closely related to the Woodmen who were in that area near Mirkwood. And if folks remember the mention of Beorn at the end of the book, we find out later on that a lot of those Woodmen will end up following him after the end of The Hobbit. He becomes a great chief afterwards in those regions, and he rules a wide land between the mountains and the wood. Also, as we discussed in the last episode, he is a man. There's no doubt about that, even though Gandalf wasn't personally certain of it. In Tolkien's one reference to Beorn in his letters, which is letter 144, he says that he was a man and a bit of a magician. So he's not a Maya or an elf or any other magical being. He's just this guy, you know.
He's just, he was just this guy, you know. Some people are fond of the theory that Beorn may be descended from Beorn. They often point to the similarity of the names. They like to point out that both of them were vegetarians. And that Beorn was friendly with the animals of Tar Nifuin, who brought him meals on... Oh, wait, no, that was different. And that Beorn had been known to shapeshift in his own story, which is, those things are true. And it's a neat thought, but there's really nothing in the text to support it. Beorn's shapeshifting, first of all, it wasn't anything of his own accord. He changed into the orc by the power of Finrod, and then Luthien helped him end up looking like Draugluin, the werewolf. So it wasn't an ability that he had. It was an enchantment that 2 other people put on him. So there's certainly no reason to believe that would be passed down. So you're really just left with 2 characters with similar names who are both vegetarians and love animals. There's probably, a bunch of folks like that standing at your local grocery store asking for donations to Greenpeace. So,
probably many of them listening to the show, honestly.
Well, maybe. And, that wasn't an insult. I hope they don't take it as that. But it is still an extremely tenuous link, and not to mention Beorn's line. Yeah,
I mean, not to mention that what we do know of Beorn's line pretty much makes it impossible. I mean, the only line of descent that comes from Beorn down to the Third Age is the Númenórean line, the line of Aragorn.
Right.
Now, Tolkien says that Beorn is descended from the Edain, but he doesn't say he's one of the Dúnedain. That's a very important distinction. Remember that the Edain includes everybody from the Rohirrim to the Men of Dale to the Woodmen, of this area that Beorn is presumably of.
All the middlemen.
Right, exactly. Now, I have seen the response to that objection, the response that, well, maybe Beorn actually is descended from one of Dior's other children, one of Dior's sons, Ellared or Ellarine.
Oh, goodness, no.
Remember, those were Elwing's brothers who were little boys when they were kidnapped and left to die in the wild by Celegorm's followers. This is back in chapter 22 of the Silmarillion. That's just really unlikely. I mean, remember, they were like 5 or 6 when they were left to die. Maedhros looked for them with no luck. And I mean, I guess I would just have to say, even if they had survived, I just don't see any reason to believe that a human descendant of theirs in the Third Age would have any recognizable traits in common with an ancestor 6,000 years ago.
Yeah, I agree.
It's just it seems far more implausible than anything in the text would suggest.
I agree.
I did start to think for a moment that maybe Beorn was inspired by Beorn, the same way that, kind of like we talked about the Arkenstone being inspired by the Silmarils.
Okay, yeah.
But the more I think about it and the more, research I've done into it, I think even that is a stretch, because we know that Beorn was originally called Medwed, not
That's true.
Beorn, so the name similarity doesn't really give us anything there. And, it just seems like Beorn was really there. His presence there has more to do with the Tolkien children loving bears than anything else. I really just think it's a coincidence. I mean, look, these are two characters that were invented by the same author. These things happen. Sometimes there are some similarities, but I don't think that there's anything more than that. I think it's just a coincidence.
I agree. Not surprisingly, it's a little like everyone's favorite mystery man from The Lord of the Rings, Tom Bombadil. He doesn't really fit into the legendarium either, so much as he was shoehorned in there by a very determined author who really liked the character.
Yeah.
But, when you write your own legendarium, you kind of get to do what you want.
Exactly, yeah. You can put whatever you want in there. And you create this mythic world. You don't have to explain everything.
That's right. Enigmas are good.
I just don't think there's a lot more to say about Beorn or Tom.
No.
But hopefully that helps, Brad. I think we've given you pretty much all we've got in terms of, who he is and where he comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So our second message in the mailbag tonight is a comment on a more recent episode. Mm-hmm. After listening to our discussion of Chapter 5 and Gollum's glowing eyes, Mary D. in Eugene, Oregon, wrote in to say, "It seems to me that Gollum isn't the only being in the legendarium who has eyes that actually emit light. This is, of course, mere speculation, but when Frodo and company meet Gildor in the Shire, the elves seem to shine with a faint radiance like moonlight. I seem to remember that the Sindar spoke of the Noldor when they met them as flame-eyed. Obviously, I know that to say someone has bright eyes is often metaphorical, a description of an animated expression, but it is fun to consider the luminosity of people's eyes as being more than just that." I thought that was a cool observation. I think it is a fun thought. With Mary's help, I did find the reference that she was talking about to the Sindar calling the Noldor flame-eyed. It's in the War of the Jewels.
Oh, okay. It didn't sound familiar, and that's because I haven't read that one in a while.
Yeah. War of the Jewels. The Sindar and the Noldor, Tolkien says, could hardly be told apart except by their eyes, for the eyes of all the elves that had dwelt in Aman impressed those of Middle-earth by their piercing brightness, for which reason the Sindar often called them Lachend, plural Lechend, flame-eyed.
There you go. But that does sound like a metaphor because it's the piercing brightness, and it's then they're called flame-eyed because of the piercing brightness. They're not called flame-eyed because of their burning eyeballs.
Well, that's a fair point, so that could be a metaphor.
Anyway, there are other places where the Noldor are described as having light in their eyes. In the Silmarillion, Chapter 13, when Feanor's host is attacked by orcs in the Dagor Nu in Gileath, we are told that the Noldor, outnumbered and taken at unawares, were yet swiftly victorious, for the light of Aman was not yet dimmed in their eyes, and they were strong and swift and deadly in anger, and their swords were long and terrible.
Now, see, that one sounds more literal to me.
Yeah.
I feel like there is actually
there is
light.
some
now,
true
of course,
light.
That was when they had just freshly come back.
Yeah,
you know,
they just burned the boats. I mean,
right, right, exactly. Remember, it was those.
Maybe
guys
that was the light we were looking at.
Well, then in Chapter 18 of the Silmarillion, when Fingolfin rode off to challenge Morgoth to single combat, we read that he passed over Dor Nufalglith like a wind amid the dust, and all that beheld his onset fled in amaze, thinking that Orome himself was come, for a great madness of rage was upon him, so that his eyes shone like the eyes of the Valar. Now, that one I think is probably metaphorical, if any.
Yeah, I agree. There is another example from Lord of the Rings that's definitely not metaphorical, that Mary mentions. It's in Fellowship Chapter 3 when they meet Gildor. The text says that before long the elves came down the lane towards the valley. They passed slowly, and the hobbits could see the starlight glimmering on their hair and in their eyes. They bore no lights, yet as they walked, a shimmer, like the light of the moon above the rim of the hills before it rises, seemed to fall about their feet.
Yeah, that one seems like it has to be literal.
Yeah. I don't know that that's coming from their eyes, though. I mean, the starlight's glimmering in their eyes, but it almost seems like that light just emits from all of, like, their whole body. Yeah. But I don't know. It's hard to say.
Well, there's definitely a light,
Yeah.
There's a characteristic of the Noldor, and I think it probably comes from their Calaquendi nature.
Agreed.
To some degree, and in some way, whether literal or metaphorical or both at times, the light of the trees that they saw in Aman continues to shine in them, and I think that's just a beautiful thought.
I agree.
Less beautiful, there's another creature that's described in the Silmarillion as having light in its eyes, and I came across this one when I was looking for more references to the Noldor being light-eyed. In Chapter 19, when Beorn and Finrod are in Sauron's dungeons, from time to time they saw two eyes kindled in the dark, and a werewolf devoured one of the companions, but none betrayed their lord. Now that's the one that reminds me a lot of Gollum. The gleaming eyes of the predator in the dark is definitely what I think of when I think of Gollum here. So
Yeah, that's creepy.
Yeah. Fun little bit of research there, though.
Yeah, it is fun. I love digging that stuff up. And folks, as always, those are some great questions. That wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. But no, don't leave us yet. As always, we thank you very much for joining us, but stick around because we still have stuff to say, and we look forward to having you join us again next time when we start Chapter 8 of The Hobbit, Flies and Spiders.
And one of the things we'd like to say is that if you wouldn't mind heading over to iTunes for us and leaving a review, we'd really be grateful for that.
We would.
I know I say this at the end of every episode, but it is true. Those reviews help us get more visibility in iTunes, and that makes our community bigger, brings more Tolkien lovers to the podcast, and that's good for all of us.
That is. And exactly, we say it because it's true. We wouldn't say it. Thank you to those of you who have, by the way, left reviews. We're really grateful for them. We do read every single one of them, and we really appreciate the nice things you say. In fact, we've started picking out one special review every week to feature on our social media networks on Thankful Thursday as a way of showing our appreciation.
That's right. So if you'd like to see your name or your alias in lights on our pages,
Your family-friendly alias.
Yes, please. All you have to do is leave us a review. And make sure you never miss an episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast by subscribing to our podcast through iTunes or your favorite podcast app. You can find us in every podcast directory I know of.
Yep.
And if there was another one I knew of that we weren't on, we'd be on it. So
That's right.
And check out the podcast app in iOS 11 for you iPhone users. That supports our new season and episode tags.
And we're also on Potable now. Potable's a new platform that helps you discover new podcasts by finding new and emerging creators and recommending them to you. While other apps make you sort through clunky charts and other things to find your new podcast, Potable learns your interests. Sort of like the Netflix algorithm, really would probably be the best analogy. And it recommends new shows and new episodes of both popular shows and undiscovered shows. So you can spend less time searching and more time listening. And that app is available. It's a web app for desktop, and it is also available on iTunes, and I understand it's coming very soon, if it's not out already, on Android.
Good to know. And we want to thank all those of you who have become part of our social media family. We set out to start a Tolkien conversation that everybody could join. That's why we have the online common room on Facebook at The Prancing Pony Podcast and on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod.
And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, or descriptions of your last dancing bear dream. See, I told you it was disturbing.
That is disturbing.
To Barlaman at theprancingponypodcast.com. That is our new email address, so please take note. Barlaman at theprancingponypodcast.com. And we'll try to get into our next episode. My goodness, what about an hour 35, hour 40? Still far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.